Okay, hi everyone, and this is Saving Cinderella, the class. This is episode 1, I guess not episode 1, session 1, and it's called The Importance of Fairy Tales and Why Feminists Get Them So Wrong. So if you are watching at home, this is the only time I'm going to address you. You cannot participate in any way that I can hear you, but you're welcome to communicate with each other in the chat. Also, anybody who doesn't know, this class is based off of this book, Saving Cinderella, What Feminists Get Wrong About Disney Princesses and How to Set It Right, which is by me, Faith Moore. And this is one of 7 sessions. So if you're interested in signing up and you haven't, please check below in the description and you can click the link and sign up. You can also click a link to buy the book. And we're gonna get started. Today we are talking about fairy tales, why they're important and why people really totally don't get them. I currently have 4 amazing students. The 5th student is working on some technical issues and hopefully will join us in a moment, but I think that the first thing we should do is introduce ourselves. So what I would like us to do is tell everyone your name, or whatever name you would like to go by if you are freaked out about being broadcast live. So your name and your favorite fairy tale and why it's your favorite. So I will go first to just break the ice. I'm Faith, and my favorite fairy tale is Beauty and the Beast. And the reason I love it so much is because I think it's an amazing metaphor for the way that the love of a woman and a good woman can transform a man, and an amazing metaphor for masculinity as well. So I'm going to, well, this is kind of going to defeat the purpose of you saying your name, but I'm going to say your name so that everybody's not talking over each other, and then you should introduce yourself. So I'm going to go down my line starting on the left. So CJ.
Okay, so that's me. I am CS Johnson, but I go by CJ on my emails because my real name is too long to type out. And I'm an author, like Faith, but I write fiction. And my favorite fairy tale is Cinderella, for a lot of personal goofy reasons, in addition to the more impressive educational ones. But I like that it is kind of like the fairy tale that touches on the self-actualization that comes with the different levels of, you know, the personal, the universal, and the spiritual.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Patty.
Okay. Hi, my name is Patty. I guess my favorite fairy tale might be different from my favorite Disney princess movie, but for the sake of favorite fairy tale, I'm going to say Cinderella too, because I feel like the message of just persevering and having hopes and dreams is a really good message for anyone to admire and hold on to, I think.
Awesome, thank you. Eric.
Hi. Hello. Oh wait. It's Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law. Okay, can you guys?
That's okay. We can hear you.
Sorry. All right. Can you guys see me? Awesome. Awesome. All right. Just my luck. My introduction and things fall. Okay. Hello. My name is Eric. Eric Michael Blake. My favorite fairy tale, to the surprise of no one who's been following Faith Moore's podcast, is Enchanted. And the reason it's my favorite is because of how self-reflectively, how it comments on the Disney princess mythos, and it does it in a way that celebrates it and affirms it and says, yes, these kinds of stories, they are relevant as we remember them.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I think I just clicked something that made noise. Okay, thanks, Eric. Were you done? I heard 2 again.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I'm basically done.
Right, awesome, thank you. And Whitney.
Hi, I'm Whitney, and I also have a probably different favorite fairy tale that I like to read versus a Disney movie. So Cinderella is probably my favorite to read, and I've read lots of different versions. But I love the goodness in her character, and in some of the versions that I've read, she really maintains that even by treating her mean stepsisters well, and there's just some lovely versions of that story. But as far as the movies, I might like Snow White the best. I just feel like the movie has so many wonderful moments in it, and it's interesting to watch over and over again, even though probably the first time I watched it as an adult, I didn't really appreciate some of it because it seemed slow or something.
It is slow, but yeah, there's a lot going on there, but I totally agree with you. Thanks. And so since
Hey,
Cinderella lovers
sorry,
here. Okay, one second. Yeah, since we have a lot of Cinderella lovers here and we just talked about Snow White, session 2 is next Sunday at the same time. It's all about Snow White, and then session 3 is all about Cinderella. So I hope you guys will all sign up. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that slow-paced movies are among my favorite movies are very slow-paced, slow burn kind of movies, because like especially if they're about getting to know the characters. Just saying.
Yeah, I think Snow White is a little bit more about like animals falling all over each other, and I
think that's at the beginning.
Yeah. And I always say Snow White has like 6 minutes of like really exciting adventure romance, and the rest is like animals falling all over each other and dwarfs falling in water. But we'll definitely talk about Snow White next week and hold all of those amazing thoughts. So it's so amazing to have you guys here, and I'm really excited about this way of having a class. So this session, we're going to just talk about fairy tales. This is the intro session, and we're going to talk about why they are so maligned in our culture. Especially by feminists, but a lot of people get them wrong and they kind of misunderstand them. But the thing is that they're these really old stories that they've been around for, in some cases, thousands of years. And they speak to universal truths in really succinct and easy to understand, if you know what you're looking for, ways. And wait, we have one more person joining our video right now.
Woo!
Jake, are you there? I see a random picture. Jake? No? Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about fairy tales, what they are, why people get them so wrong, and how to argue with your feminist friends about them, which is always an excellent skill to have. So, the first thing that I want to do is have people, I'm going to, my fancy paper here, I'm going to write this down. Whoa. Okay. So I would like to hear what you guys are aware of out in the world. I even have markers. About feminist ideas about fairy tales. What do feminists say about fairy tales? And I think what the best idea is, raise your hand and I will call on you so you don't all talk to each other. Patty.
Okay. Well, like for example, if I use like Cinderella, people like just quickly when they say Cinderella, they would say, oh, it's about a shoe. It's just about the shoes. It's about the dress. And especially it's a woman who, you know, she was poor, and the only way to get out of her unfortunate situation was to marry a rich guy. That's it. Like, that's kind of like this fairy tale is all that this woman hoped for. That's it. That's about it.
Awesome. So I've got clothes, superficial.
Clothes, superficial. The shoes would probably be
marry a rich guy. All right. Excellent. Anyone else? Raise your hands. Oh, Eric.
Oh, well, the main thing that I've been hearing from these, I call them pseudo-feminists, is that Disney princesses are weak, that they don't take charge, that they're passive, that they wait around, that it's up to the prince to get things done and change her situation.
Okay, so I put weak, passive. I'm also going to put damsel in distress because I think that's kind of here. Okay.
Here we go.
Anyone else?
Hi. So, Whitney? Okay. I think that some of the versions I've read of Cinderella will take out the wedding at the end, and I think that a lot of the feminists have the problem with her marrying the prince, and that they don't like wedding as a happy ending.
Excellent. Okay, so marriage, wedding. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, well, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
A lot of people are intellectually lazy. So I have a problem with this no matter what group it is. But like it kind of adds to what everybody else is saying, is that they only look at what the like the worst possible ways that you can interpret some of the symbols and the images that you get from them are. Like the bestiality connection to Beauty and the Beast. That's not actually what it is.
Yeah, so I'm going to put this down here because this is actually what we're going to be mostly talking about today, but I don't know if you guys can see all the way down here. Can you guys see what I'm writing?
Yeah.
Awesome. So
Yeah,
I'm going to
I can see it.
I'm going to write literal because actually that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today is this confusion and it's exactly what CJ was just talking about. But you guys hit on a bunch of great ones. So we've got that they're superficial and they only care about their clothes or power. I mean, this marry a rich guy is kind of the same idea, right? They only care about wealth, power, kind of like the external trappings of life, right? So those two things go together, and then that they're weak or passive, that they are damsels in distress, they need someone to come and rescue them, they have no agency, and then that they all sort of only want, they're husband hunters, right? They only want marriage and a wedding, and that's somehow wrong or bad. Okay. Now my next question is this. Do we agree with any of these? Because that's okay. Do we think that there's any truth in any of these? And you can raise your hand and I will call on you. Eric.
There are, on occasion, like especially with the very earliest one, Snow White, like maybe you could kind of sort of see where they're coming from, but only if you're not looking very hard like at exactly what's going on. But I think that certainly after that with Cinderella, from Cinderella on, I can't help but look at these critiques and say, did you even watch the movie? Because especially with because looking at Cinderella, just the very fact that she's often that she does silently like protest, like especially like when they're out of the room, she talks about it to her animal friends about about her problems and so on. It's not that she's passive, is that she is looking for the best in a bad situation. And from that point on, we do see her active. But from that point on, like we see them active. It's just not active in the way that these pseudo-feminists want. They seem to limit themselves to, oh, she should be the one taking up her sword, or she should be the one like hitting the stepsisters or what have you.
Okay, great. So it sounds like in terms of how we are feeling about it, and other people can jump in a second too, it's possible that maybe Snow White has some of these qualities, maybe a little bit Cinderella at the beginning, but for the most part, we're saying no. Does anyone else want to say if there are certain, because there could be certain elements, right, that might be that might fit into any of these categories. Does anyone want to say something that maybe does fit into these categories? Patty?
Oh, well, after watching Sleeping Beauty, which I hadn't watched in ages, and I know I've heard people say like, oh, Aurora doesn't have a lot of speaking lines, and actually, yeah, it's pretty true. When I was watching the movies, like she has a great song, but actually the essence of that song is still like, I'm hoping for true love. I'm hoping for the man to find me. So I guess it's not, I still don't see it as weakness for her to want to have love, but I guess for a feminist, it would seem really weak. Like that's all my hopes and dreams in my life are to find a man. That's basically it. So for Aurora, but I just don't think it's weakness, but for the feminists, they might say, that's it. That's all she wants in life.
That's great. And I totally hear you on that. Hang on one second. I'm going to call on CJ. She hasn't gone yet. CJ, go ahead.
Okay. Kind of playing off that though, is like a lot of the fairy tales deal with marriage. If it's one thing in particular that when I was growing up, and I had my feminazi era, I didn't like, and a lot of them had to deal with marriage, and I never really understood why until, of course, I got married and had kids. So.
Right, exactly. So that question of why are they dealing with marriage, and is the marriage just
Prince has more variety in some of his like log lines, the storylines for its fairy tales for men.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Why are they all the same? Eric, go ahead.
I was just going to like yes and a little bit onto what Patty said, because Patty brought up a Sleeping Beauty, and with Sleeping Beauty, and I forgot about that, I think maybe a case could be made about her being passive and doesn't do much. But in the film's defense, even though she's the title character, the story is not about her. She's pretty much a supporting character, and the main characters are the fairies, who all to one are women. So that's
absolutely right. So my next question is, so we're going to talk about whether or not these things actually are what's important in the fairy tales, or whether they actually happen in the fairy tales. But my next question is, if these things are what's important in the fairy tales and they really do happen, would it be wrong? And what do you guys think? Like, are these things bad things? Or are some of them bad things and some of them are okay? What do you guys think? Anybody? Or I can go. But raise your hand. Okay, CJ.
Okay, so anything taken to an extreme can lead to a bad thing. Like all the people that say, oh, they're only about marriage and finding Prince Charming and stuff, that would be a bad. Like, I wouldn't tell my daughter, oh, you have to marry a prince, or you'll, you'll have a less fulfilling life. So.
Okay, right. So basically, if any of these things were the only thing, and they were saying you only have to do this thing, that would
if
be
you
bad.
only had the right shoes, if you only had the right connections, if you only had the right prince.
Right, exactly. Like if it was actually about like her dress and her shoes, and that the fairy tale was promoting this idea that shoes and a dress is like you have to have this, otherwise you're not gonna be successful in life, that would be bad. I agree. Okay, anyone else want to add? Eric?
Oh, the only quality that you listed that would seem to be bad in and of itself would seem to be is weak passive.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the only princess that arguably a case could be made displays that would have to be Aurora, Sleeping Beauty. But again, it's because we don't see much of her. And it's worth noting, though, she does quickly run away and rebel a little bit, but she does come back. But again, it's because she isn't a central character per se. It's just the action is based on her and it's around her, but she's not meant to be the active prime mover, the protagonist of the plot. The fairies are, and they're very active and they're very strong.
Cool. Okay, so if these characters really were weak and passive, then that would be bad, right? So and if I'm just summarizing, right? If they were weak and passive, that would be bad. Also, if they were only obsessed with fashion, that would be bad. Anybody else want to say if these things are bad? Whitney?
Well, I wanted to elaborate on the weak and passive part about Cinderella in the movie, because I think if you look at her character, sometimes you can just see her following directions, doing what other people tell her, and you can look at that as enduring the bad circumstances that she's in, but you could also just say she's not active, sassy, like a modern princess, or like, Merida. That's her modern idea.
Right, exactly. So and that's a good point, because what does it mean? Like, what are the qualities that they're saying are weak and passive, and do we think that they're weak and passive, right? So like that's another thing too, is like if the critique is these characters are weak and passive and we want them to be more like Merida, or like somebody who punches people in the face, then maybe we're sort of saying, well, that's not really what weak and passive means. Okay, does anyone else, before I move on, does anyone else want to comment on that? CJ, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just like, with the weak and passive thing, I don't think they're always synonymous either. Like what Whitney was saying is like, sometimes you just have to endure bad situations. So, like, just from some basic life experiences, like being in debt or going to college. I mean, you just have to grin and bear it sometimes.
Right, exactly. And actually, that's one of the critiques that I've heard a lot about Cinderella is, she never once tried to get out of her bad situation, and that might be seen as passive, except that, like, really, what was her other choice? I mean, was she going to run away and be a servant in somebody else's home, or was she going to invent something amazing that people would buy? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to assume that she could have escaped in a way that didn't involve having somewhere else to go. So I think what CJ is saying makes a lot of sense too. Is that, what does it mean? Why is passive a negative thing necessarily? It isn't always. Okay. So we've talked about being superficial is probably not a great idea. We've talked about, oh, we'll marry a rich guy. Is marrying a rich guy like wrong and bad? What do you guys think?
Not
Eric?
in of itself.
Well,
Not in and of
no,
itself.
I'm staying out of this. I'm staying out of this
Sorry,
situation
that's
because I am the guy.
Okay, I see, by the way, that Jake keeps popping in and out of the conversation, and I don't know if you can hear us, Jake, but if you can, you're welcome to stay, and if not, I'm really sorry, and we can talk after about that. But anyway, so yeah, marrying a rich guy, if you love him, and he happens to be rich, right? That's not a big deal. I think the issue sometimes is with, oh, CJ, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, like, as long as, like, it's definitely okay to marry a rich and good guy, but, like, I mean, that's kind of like the pairing that you want, is, like, you want a good guy. Like,
Right.
you know, like, my favorite,
Yeah.
like, myth is actually the Persephone and Hades myth. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's this terrible guy that steals this woman. And to me, it's like a wonderful triumph of the feminine, because they build Elysia within Hades and stuff. So it's like, it's a very cool film or story for me to contemplate. So, but like, marrying a rich guy is not bad, but only if the guy is like good.
Right, exactly. Perfect. Yeah. So we sort of talked about damsel in distress within weak and passive. Wedding. I think we can probably all agree that weddings are not inherently bad, and that marriage is not inherently bad. And we can talk later about why feminists don't like that part. And then we're going to talk in a minute about things being literal. So this is fantastic, and that would be my list too. I think these are the things that feminists say are wrong with fairy tales. So the thing is, Jake is telling us via text or something that this is not working at all. I'm really sorry, Jake. We'll come back to you later, and you can be in another one, I promise. Okay. So let's just sort of start with some basic information, okay? Fairy tales have been around in some form or another for thousands of years. The fairy tales that we know in general were written down by people who heard them told orally, because initially they were oral stories, mostly, in particular the fairy tales that we have as part of our canon. Those stories in general were stories told by mothers to their children in order to try to make more manageable some of the frightening things that happen in life, or to sort of teach a lesson, or to kind of boil down some universal truth. A lot of them, particularly the princess ones, are about girls growing into their womanhood, even as specific as like puberty and what happens to a woman's body when she grows. So the reason that perhaps we don't know that, or feminists don't know that, is because they are told symbolically. And this is a way that they can be told quickly and in an easy to digest way. So they use, sorry, I'm just distracted by people coming in. It's okay. So here is the crux of the issue when it comes to misunderstanding fairy tales. Fairy tales are full of symbols, and they can't be taken literally. So this is kind of what CJ was talking about before. If you take a fairy tale literally, this list of things is what you come up with, right? Maybe not like marriage is bad. I mean, that's something we can talk about too. But like, you come up with these things like, oh, Cinderella is all about shoes and a dress, right? This guy comes in at the end and saves the day. She's poor, he's rich, right? All of these literal things are there in the stories, but these literal things are not actually what the story is about, and this is where the confusion comes. So I just want to show you something really quick. I'm going to get rid of this for one second. I'm going to show you this. You guys probably already know that. People watching at home probably already know this, but it could be useful the next time, as I'm sure you all do, the next time you're having one of these conversations with somebody who tells you that fairy tales are horribly anti-feminist and must be eliminated. This might help, okay? If I do this, that's the word apple, right? Mm-hmm. But if you didn't know how to read, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't get a picture in your mind of an apple, right? You would just see a bunch of lines on a page, or maybe if you knew the alphabet, you would see A, P, P, L, E, but you wouldn't understand at all that I was trying to convey the concept of this, an apple, right? This is how feminists read fairy tales. They look at the things in the fairy tale and they see a series of letters or a bunch of symbols on a page. They don't read the symbols to understand the thing, right? We read the word apple and we immediately think this, but this isn't an apple, right? This is a symbol. These are symbols that tell us this, okay? This can also become a symbol, right? In fairy tales and in a lot of stories, an apple is symbolic. Do you guys have any thoughts about what apples might symbolize? You can raise your hand. Patty?
Well, I think about, it's not, I mean, like traditionally when people talk about like Adam and Eve in Genesis story, they, you know, the apple is basically like knowledge and the fall, basically.
Yes. So knowledge is a big one. And one other that I'm thinking of, oh, Jake, I think I can hear you. Are you there?
Am I coming through?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Woo!
I can't see you. But
All right.
Oh, hi, everybody. This is Jake.
How you doing, Jake?
We can see a
Hello.
picture of you. That's awesome. So welcome to the class. I'm sorry you're having technical difficulties, but we're very glad you're
Coincidentally,
here.
that's
Oh, now we can't hear you anymore, but that's okay.
Great. Yay.
Okay, I can kind of hear you sometimes. So I can't see you, so if you want to raise your hand, you can't. So just say like, hey, call on Jake. Okay, so we're talking about apples. We're talking about symbols. So, okay, an apple can symbolize knowledge. Is there anything else an apple can symbolize?
Sorry.
CJ?
Oh, like the forbidden.
Forbidden, Eric, was your hand up?
Yes, temptation. It's the basic temptation. And we see this with, especially when the hag specifically tempts Snow White or Giselle or whoever with a specific thing. Like, in Snow White, the hag says, you know, well, it will it's a wishing apple. Or in Enchanted, the hag says to Giselle, like, it will make those bad memories go away.
Right. So temptation, knowledge, the forbidden. Anything else? Patty?
Well, we just finished watching Aladdin, and there was that scene where, you know, Jafar offers the apple to Jasmine, and, you know, it's like you mentioned in the chapter, it's red, and it's very sexual, and it's, as an adult watching it, I was like, oh, it's really cringy. Like, it does look very sexual.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the one I was going to say, too, is sex. Right, an apple also, and knowledge and sex and sexual knowledge, like sexual awakening, right, is another thing that an apple represents. And specifically, you guys mentioned already Snow White. When Snow White bites into the red apple, she falls asleep, and when she wakes up, she is a woman, right? So we'll talk more about that next week, right, in Snow White. But the point here is, if you couldn't read, this would just look like a bunch of symbols. If you can't read a fairy tale correctly, this just looks like an apple. The shoes look like shoes, the dress looks like a dress, everything looks like what it is, but it isn't, right? So let's see if we can kind of tease out some of the symbols, some of the things that are symbolic in fairy tales. And to do this, let's just think about things that show up in multiple fairy tales. So like things that show up over and over again in fairy tales, because chances are those are the things that we're meant to sort of see more symbolically than realistically. So if you can just raise your hand and tell me, say like one thing, maybe two, because you might have like 500 in your head, but let's let everybody have a turn. So raise your hand, tell me one or two things that show up again and again in fairy tales. Let's see, Patty.
Maybe in, like, for example, in the Disney princess movies, you see a lot of transformation. Maybe that's like a symbol.
Great, transformation. Okay, who else? Eric.
True Love's Kiss.
Good. Right, true love.
Yeah, True Love's Kiss.
What else?
I was gonna say, like the color red,
Mhm.
Like Red Riding Hood and the Red Apple and
Perfect.
red roses maybe.
Yeah, great. There's Snow White and Rose Red also. There's a lot of
Right.
red. Anyone else?
Some sort of paragon character, like the fairy godmother type character.
Yep. So some kind of fairy god or god stand-in, right? Godmother character. All right. What else?
That's very good.
The old crone, the old evil stepmother.
Yep. A crow.
Ooh.
CJ.
Well, the prince and princess.
Yep. Okay. So Prince.
Pretty basic.
Can you still see this? I don't know. I'm gonna go up here. Princess. Handwriting was never my best subject. Anything else? Eric.
The trope that she can talk to animals.
Okay.
Talk with animals, at least.
All right. Talking to animals. That is totally there. Patty.
You could say like the princess or the heroine is very beautiful.
Yep. Beauty. Okay. Anything else? Just call them out, because we're not. We're done.
Well, I think about in the Disney movies. I mean, in the Disney movies that are based on fairy tales, every heroine has a beautiful voice, and just a beautiful singing voice.
Yep. Okay. A voice. Excellent. Anybody else? I'll just call it out. It's fine.
Gold.
Gold.
There's a lot of with the princess and the frog kind of stories, the golden ball and golden goose.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And Jack and the Beanstalk, there's the gold and the golden harp, I think. I'm gonna add falling asleep.
Oh yeah.
Okay, this is a good list. Anything else? Anybody else? Going once. Going twice. Okay.
Magic.
What's that? Magic? Yeah, magic.
Magic.
Okay. I don't know if you can see all the way down here, but okay. Great. Perfect. This is an excellent list. Okay. These are absolutely all symbols. And these are things that I would have said too. You guys have some great ones also. Yeah, so these are all the symbols. There's more, right? Forests too. No. Does forest have one
Oh
arm?
yeah, the woods.
One arm. EST.
I always get that wrong because the name has two. Anyway, okay. Those are all excellent. They're fairy tale symbols. If you take these things literally and then you read the story, you get a bunch of weird stuff, right? Like a bunch of really weird stuff goes on in these stories. I mean, there are even stories where like characters marry inanimate objects, right? Or like, these things, like people talk to animals, everybody's a princess or a prince, everybody's beautiful or ugly. There's the witch, there's the crone, there's all of these different characters. And if you take them literally, then you end up with the list we had on the previous page, right? Does anyone want to pick one of these and tell us what you think they represent? We already talked about apples. We didn't even put apples. Any of these that maybe you can guess or you know already what it represents. And Patty.
Okay. I guess to piggyback kind of on what you wrote, I really like, actually, I do like what you said in the chapters with voice, like with Aurora or even Ariel, like their voice represents a beautiful soul. And I think about Ariel maybe that's going to be in sessions later, but like voice gets taken, like pretty much, she makes a deal with the devil and her soul is taken from her. So I like the symbolism of the princess who's beautiful, has a beautiful voice, she has a good nature. I thought I like that, a voice meaning good nature or a good soul, basically.
Right, yeah, so a voice kind of standing in for somebody's inner beauty or their inner self. And we kind of, when you think about like the language that we use anyway, we talk about, speak up, use your voice, let your voice be heard, that kind of thing. And it usually kind of indicates that what we're saying is like, tell us who you really are, right? Tell us your thoughts and your feelings and your inner self, right? So your voice, so voice is kind of a metaphor or a symbol for inner self. Excellent. Anybody else want to pick another one?
The woods.
Yeah, go for it. The woods.
Ooh.
Oh, hang on.
You know.
Okay.
Oh. Am I?
Oh, we can't hear you. I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
know about the woods. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
I could hear you.
Oh, you guys could hear him?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, he said the woods represent the unknown.
Oh, the unknown. Perfect. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't hear it. Yeah, the unknown. Excellent. I have also read that the woods are the symbol of the, and this goes with the unknown, but the protagonist's inner turmoil. That when they go into the woods, they have a problem. In the woods, they deal with it, and when they come out of the woods, they've solved it, or like it's come to some sort of fruition, like some sort of conclusion. And if you think about, there's a musical called Into the Woods, right? And it's
Yes.
that musical is called that because all of the different people come into the woods with these issues, and then they come out of the woods changed. So the woods is really, and the sort of the cottage in the woods, or and often the witch is in the woods too, right? So the woods is kind of this place of kind of like turmoil and inner turmoil. DJ.
Oh, yeah, I'm kind of piggybacking off of that. It's also a symbol of being like uncertain or lost or confused.
Yeah.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, it's like, it's not so much like, oh, you know, the woods are bad, never go in the woods. Like, if you took it literally, right, a lot of bad stuff in fairy tales happens in the woods, right? The wolf is in the woods, the witch is in the woods, you get lost in the woods, Hansel and Gretel get sort of like foisted off into the woods. That it could be like, you know, oh, the woods are bad, don't go into them. That's like a literal reading, right? Woods are bad. When you go in the woods, you get lost and bad things happen, right? But that's kind of like, okay, you could say the same about like mountain roads, you know, like you could say the same about a lot of places that might be like empty car parks at night, right? Like things that are dangerous. But really it's sort of like when perhaps if this was happening in real life, perhaps the character wouldn't actually go to the woods. It's something that's happening inside of the character, as represented by the woods, which are sort of like you can't see very far. There's a lot of things going on. It's dark, all of this stuff. So it's sort of an outer representation of an inner situation. So woods, excellent. Any of these other things? Oh, Whitney.
Also, I feel like in the woods there are distractions, temptations, things like that. Little Red Riding Hood, you know, she's supposed to get through that. She has her directions to get through, but she's supposed to learn how to navigate the dangers in the woods.
Yes, exactly. Right. So you're supposed to kind of, yeah, you have to go into the woods, because if you don't go into the woods, you don't face the thing that you're trying to face. I mean,
You can get to where you want to go.
the wolf of Little Red Riding, like Little Red Riding Hood's wolf is always a man. Like it's not, I mean, it's played by a man, obviously it's a play, but like they don't even pretend that he's a wolf. He's a man, because she's dealing with this, right? She's dealing with her kind of like sexual awakening, right? So yeah, you're dealing with something, and you have to go through the woods in order to get out the other side. Eric, did you want to say
Very
something?
much so. Yeah, I would say, like, if we could tackle the fairy godmother one for a bit. The fairy godmother, when we think about it, it strikes me as the Deus ex machina trope done right. I mean, usually, like, when we complain about Deus ex machina, it's something that happens at the end to wrap things up and it comes out of nowhere. God and the machine. But the fairy godmother is a godlike figure, or a Christ-like figure, who comes in and brings about a change. But the change does not necessarily solve everything. What it does is it initiates a change for the heroine, but in the process, yeah, it's a plot twist and it causes that change, but she also has to deal with the consequences of that change, and that's the rest of the plot.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that fairy godmother and transformation go together, right? It's this kind of idea of, you're right. So if you're looking at this literally, it's like, oh, she couldn't even figure out how to get to the ball by herself. I mean, it's like that, you know, she had to have this magical person come and save her. She's so passive, right? That would be the literal sort of reading of that,
Yeah.
like a deus ex machina, right? Something came out of nowhere and solved it because she's just so sad and she can't deal with herself. But I mean, honestly, like, do we really think that she couldn't have gone and like chosen a different dress from the cabinet of her stuff?
Absolutely.
You know,
There you
so
go.
like there's obviously something else is going on, right? So, I mean, for me, in my book, right, I talk about Disney's version of the fairy godmother being a sort of almost like a god stand-in, like this person that kind of helps Cinderella kind of reach her fullest potential. But I think there is this kind of, there has to be some sort of magical way to enact the transformation. And the transformation is often a way of getting the person's inner self to somehow be visible on the outside. Right, if you think about the transformation of the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, that's what's going on, right? He is now a man on the inside, but he still looks like a beast on the outside. So he has to be transformed so that his inner self is visible to everyone on the outside. And it happens to him in the beginning too, right? He looks like a handsome prince, but he's a beast inside. So he gets changed into what he is. And the same thing happens for Cinderella, but in a different way. Her beautiful, shining, wonderful soul is made manifest so the prince can be like, oh yeah, you, out of all of these people. So I think that's absolutely right, that the fairy godmother is the symbol for allowing us and the world to see the inside of somebody, which is something that can obviously never happen in real life, right? So it's obviously symbolic. CJ.
I was just gonna actually like point that out, is like in real life, like it would be a person or like a personal agent of power. So I mean, like, you can talk about the supernatural and with the ex machina stuff and everything, but like on the, like, if you're gonna take it on, there is like a spectrum for the supernatural versus the natural. It would be like an agent of power. So
Right.
I think,
and that like the mentorship kind of makes sense because like teaching kind of brings out more of a potential in somebody.
I think another thing you could see it as for is God's will as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Very much so.
the effect of redemption. You know, it's kind of a savior figure, right? That's what we think of it as, or that's what we think of a fairy godmother often as.
Right, exactly. And I think that's why it's a godmother as opposed to just like a fairy, right? Like the word God is in there for a reason. And I think some versions of these stories use that more forcefully than others, but I absolutely think that that's part of it.
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, and also, like, I think it is, like Jake was getting at, like, it is worth looking at the words. It's exactly what she's called. Now, yes, we look at God by itself, and you can see the spiritual implications of that, but also look at, as a whole, godmother. And what is a godmother or a godfather? Traditionally, he or she is someone who is ordained, agrees upon, and is ordained by the church to assist in the spiritual growth of the child, especially the spiritual growth, but like help the child in her, in this case, in her development as she becomes a woman, or as he becomes a man, if you will. So in this case, a fairy godmother is, like, we see her when she shows up. Yes, she initiates a transformation. In the process, what she's doing, she is fulfilling her duty as a godmother in assisting in her spiritual growth. And in fact, she actually she mentions, it was your faith that brought me here. Right, exactly. Yeah, in the Disney movie, she absolutely talks about miracles and belief and all kinds of really Christian things. So before, I don't want us to run out of time on this, but before we talk about a couple of the really key ones, you guys have amazing ideas and you're absolutely on the right track. What about princess? Why does she have to be a princess? Because this is a big feminist complaint, right? Why does she have to be a princess? Why does she have to be beautiful? Like all of that kind of idea. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Why choose princess over and over again?
Well, I think that's it has to do with, we're all children of God, who is the king over everything. So we are all princes and princesses, if you think about it that way. So I think that to me has always seemed like an allegory for that.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, great. So if God is the king and we are all under him, then that makes us princes and princesses. Okay, excellent. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. Mm.
Eric?
Well, at the risk of sounding kind of snarky at the feminist question, was like, if she's not a princess, then it wouldn't be a Disney princess story. It might be a Disney housekeeper story, or Disney, I don't know, Disney businesswoman story.
I don't think I would watch that one.
No.
Yeah, right. So exactly, but it's like, why choose princesses, and why also like Disney chooses to put certain characters that aren't actually princesses, or maybe didn't start off as princesses, into the princess canon, and fine, that's probably for like financial reasons, but I mean, you can be a princess even when you're not one originally, right? So yeah, CJ, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say, like in your, like, the nice thing about like the Western culture, and especially with Christendom and everything, like the individual becomes capable of being the hero, like and as a princess, like, you don't have full authority over your life, and that transformation from the beginning of the film or the story or whatever to the end marks an increase in like personal autonomy and authority.
Right, exactly. So you can be kind of the center of the story, even if you're not, even if you are just the maid or businesswoman or whatever. You can be.
Everybody has their own life too, and like, my role in my life varies from setting. Oftentimes, like, here I'm in my house, and I'm the mom, so I'm literally the queen of my house.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and another.
I really like that.
Right. Exactly. Like you are the queen or the princess of your domain, right?
Yeah.
There's one other thing I would say, which is that a princess is a highborn lady, and she's young. So the reason that she's young is because a lot of the time the story is about a girl becoming a woman. So she can't be the queen or the sort of like old crone character, because the old crone has another job, right? And so the queen has the job of sort of being the force of childhood, trying to like pull back the princess. But then the princess has the job of trying to kind of go out into the world. But also the part about being highborn, princess is a symbol for the sort of ideal of womanhood. And it's not that, and this is where getting literal gets you off on all the wrong tracks. It's not that perfection is beauty and wealth and power. It's that beauty represents perfection. So you can be a princess in real life and look however you want. You can be a princess in real life and be however you want, in terms of like your wealth and your status. But the concept is that she is noble because she's noble inside, right? She's highborn because she's high, right, inside. Like, she's got high values, etc. CJ.
Okay, and kind of playing off this too, again, is this idea of innocence and beauty. Like, there's a difference between innocent virtue and innocent beauty and virtuous beauty. That kind of goes into that too. Like, I tell people that I get frustrated with sometimes, and people who know me know what I'm talking about, but it's like, there's no point in trying to keep, there's nothing virtuous or noble about remaining innocent in a world that more or less demands that you can't remain that way and be human. Like, I tell people, like, if my kids were 20 years old and they're that's where I failed as a mother, and I feel that way about, like, taking that as like an analogy for some people who refuse to grow up, and some people who walk around and end up with diapers. Intellectual quagmires.
No, exactly.
This, because it's just not. I mean, like, for some silly reason.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the thing about the princess in the story is that she loses her innocence, essentially. Not in a sort of like debased kind of a way, but just in the sense of like she becomes a woman, usually through some kind of symbolic virtue, kind of puberty, essentially, right? And I don't want us to run out of time, and I don't want to keep you over time because I'm not that kind of teacher. The
Hey, I'm game for overtime.
okay, all right, you can stay after class. What about the prince? So the princess is this kind of idealized character. We already kind of talked about, like, okay, princess and prince can have a sort of religious significance, and also that maybe if the princess is kind of this ideal of womanhood, then maybe the prince is this ideal of manhood, right? But also, what about the fact that the prince kind of shows up at the end and just kind of does something that kind of culminates in the end of the story? You know, what is that all about? Is that really back like 2 pages ago? Is that really just kind of like because she's so passive and weak? What do you guys think about the prince's role in all of this? Patty?
Okay, well, like just like you said, if these stories about girls who become young women, and so they're princesses, they're innocent, they're kind of like girls who become women, and so if they go through some kind of transformation where they become young women, I guess, like kind of like in your book when you said that the man shows up to kind of say, okay, you're ready to be a woman, basically. I think about Prince Philip. I mean, like in Sleeping Beauty, Prince, you know, she falls asleep. She has this kind of transformation where she, you know, touches the spindle, falls asleep, and then Prince Philip comes and saves the day. But I think it's, if you want to look at it symbolically, okay, now she's 16, she's ready to be a woman, and now she's ready for Prince Philip, basically, or she's ready to get married, in a sense, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So a man sort of symbolizing, I mean, literally symbolizing, not literally, but symbolizing that now the woman is ready to conceive a child, right? Like, not that she necessarily should, right? Maybe she's not emotionally ready. But when you're going to conceive a child, sorry, feminists, you need a man. And so if she is now ready, if she's gone through that transformation, then a man can be a symbol of just that readiness, right? She's now a woman. She was a girl, and now she's a woman. See, look, a man, right?
Absolutely.
Does anyone else want to add?
Well, I wanted to ask about the fact that the prince, especially in Cinderella, and I think a lot of stories, recognizes who she is at the ball, and that her own stepsister and I think stepmother who's there, like, they don't know who she is. She's somehow, you know, transformed that much, and it seems like he's the one that can see how worthy she is.
That's
Like,
right. Exactly.
He's doing something in that way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think the idea is that if the princess is this ideal of womanhood, and then the prince is this ideal of masculinity or manhood, right? Then he can recognize her in a way that other people can't. She's sort of wearing her princessness on the outside, and he's the only one that sees that because he's the only one worthy of her.
No camera.
Right.
It's not working.
Yeah. So, CJ.
Okay, I'm going to add on to that again. With and we've talked before about like the difference between the hero's journey and the princess journeys, and the princess's journey is like when she does finally meet the prince and stuff, she's like the lady that she was born to be, and by kind of joining with the prince, you know, in marriage, she's becoming more of herself in addition to you know, who she's established herself as. So, you're still yourself, but you're more of yourself when
Right, exactly. And that kind of gets to what the deal is with marriage and weddings, right? So, you know, I think for feminists, it's sort of like, why does that have to always be the end goal? Like, why is she after a man? Why can't she be after the heart of Tafiti or whatever? But, you know, like she isn't, it's not like she's after marriage. I mean, at least in the Disney versions, there's always some other thing that she's after initially, right? Like Ariel wants to be human, or Cinderella just wants to get out of this horrible situation. Belle wants adventure, all of this stuff, right? But when you find that perfect match, that motivates you and supports you so that you can do that thing. The union is sort of symbolic of the fact that the person's life has is going to be okay. They're going to be okay, right? Like you want to know in this type of story, when the princess grows from the child to a woman that her life is going to be complete and okay. And I think, I think we like people these days like to talk a lot about, like, I don't need a man or whatever. And maybe that's true, but I think for most people, some sort of romantic attachment, be it a man or a woman, I mean, whatever, like some kind of romantic attachment is part of a complete and fulfilled life. And so I think that's part of it. So we're running out of time. I feel like we could talk about this forever. I could talk about this forever. I do talk about it forever. But let's just wrap up with this, okay? If you were in a room or somewhere and somebody starts talking about how awful fairy tales are, and they start listing to you these reasons, right? The reasons that we had in the beginning, right? If they start listening to you, even if we didn't talk about it today, think about the thing. Know in your heart that it's not a literal thing, it's a symbolic thing. And then try to think about what it might be, what it might symbolize, and there is your argument, right? Like, that's always the argument, is if somebody comes at you and they say, like, ugh, I hate Cinderella, it's just about this girl who has to put on the pretty dress and shoes in order to catch the guy. Your first thought should be like, okay, dress, shoes, guy, what are those things, right? And then to tell them, no, you stupid idiot, no, don't say that. But you should tell them, right, that, that's not really a dress, it's not really a pair of shoes, and it isn't really even a guy. So, and these are the things that they are. We have a couple minutes left, like two. Does anybody have any questions before we go? Or anything that they want to say?
Okay.
Yeah, CJ, go ahead.
Okay, so I know my master's is in English, so it's weird stuff. But like, if the feminism stuff comes from the Marxism, and the Marxism highlights the materialism. So if somebody starts complaining about it, it's one of the things about Marxism is that people don't realize is that for it to be true, it would have to be true on a spiritual level as well as a material one, which they deny with the thing. So it's the whole thing is self-defeating. Like the postmodernism movement in a nutshell is denies the idea that truth does not exist, but it's like it would be the truth if that's like if your thesis is real, a lot of that kind of theory ends up keeping it. So at that point, I'd be like, well, if it doesn't matter, why do you care? And that's usually I start with that because it's the personal one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that this concept of sort of like, and it comes also, like you're saying, it's sort of like when you take the spiritual out of life, and you're just sort of left with like, we're all just kind of meat puppets, right? Like, so that idea of like, we're just, everything is what it is because there's no spiritual world, there's no metaphor, there's no symbolism at all. It doesn't play out. So obviously, it must obviously be entered. And then Eric, I think
can you take somewhere else? Around the corner or something?
Wait, say that, Eric. I think it's your turn.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a master's in film studies, and one of the things that was often emphasized was look at the patterns, and when there is a pattern, that means something. And when you see these same patterns happen over and over again in the same genre, in this case Disney princess tales, that is supposed to mean something. It is supposed to convey a specific meaning. In other words, it's not supposed to be literal. Like when you see winding staircases all the time in a Hitchcock film, that's supposed to mean something. It's supposed to be symbolic. And with that in mind, and this is something you learn in college, I learned in college, like as film studies. So with that in mind, you have to ask, if you're going to accept symbolism in something in film, why not accept symbolism in film? Why take these things literally? Why pick and choose what's literal and what's symbolism? Especially look for the patterns. Look for the things that happen over and over again, the specific tropes, and ask yourself, why do those tropes exist? Why are they tropes? Why are they patterns?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also more. Yeah. Oh, sorry. And also one more thing. When they even if, like, when you explain these things as to what they represent, if they say that's not good enough, then the $1 million question is, well, what exactly do you want? Do you want effectively for a woman in the story to act like a man? Are you saying pseudo-feminists, are you saying, feminist, that the feminist ideal is for a woman to act like a man, the very men that you seek to condemn?
Right, exactly. And that is a whole other topic that we will get to in further sessions. But yeah, just to finish what you're just piggyback off of what you're saying, I mean, we made this list of things that are in not just one, but lots and lots of fairy tales, right? And the reason that they're in so many is because they are the symbols that sort of get woven in and out of these stories to mean the same thing. And that's why these stories can be short. That's why they're easy to understand if you know what you're reading about. That's why they're for children, right? So it's obviously not just like, you know, since time immemorial, people have really cared very deeply about shoes, you know. So our time is up, but I would like to just first thank you all so much for doing this. This is amazing, and it's a sort of like experiment on my part, and as far as I'm concerned, it's gone very well. So thank you very much to all of you guys that are here. And thank you to people who've been watching at home. And I would just say that if you are watching at home, or even if you're here now, and you would like to be a part of this, you should sign up. In the description of this video is the link to enroll in a future session. There are sessions on, the next one's Snow White, then there's the Cinderella, there's also Ariel, there's Belle, there's Merida from Brave, and there's Frozen. The last
For better or worse.
Session 7 about Frozen is already full, so sorry about that. But sessions 2 through 6 have slots available, but I am getting people signing up. So if you want to be part of it, click the link now, sign up. And also just a reminder, the book, you should also buy the book if you want to. Not all of this stuff is in there, but a lot of interesting stuff is in there. So that's on Amazon, there's a link for that. And if you just tuned in, you're like, what the heck is going on? There's also a link in the description of this video to a description of what is going on. So we're gonna go off of being live right now, so thanks for watching. And we will the next one is next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And that's about Snow White. So I hope you'll tune in. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Hello. Bye.